It's not what you know, it's who you know. You know what I mean? Like we've thrown that around a lot, and a lot of times that just comes seared in people's brains, and so they kind of shut down at the thought that, well, it doesn't really matter who I know because so and so knows so and so, and they're gonna pull some strings and they're gonna get the job over me anyway. So why should I try? Right? That kind of so that thought lingers out there, and there's still some truth to that. But there's another side of that conversation too, which is this: the person, who that person who that person you do know that you're hoping will vouch for you and get you a job. You still have to know some things to be able to be relied upon, because it's like they're vouching for you to, they're representing you in a sense to say, okay, this person's good. I give my blessing for you to give them a chance at something. Now, if you don't got what it takes, again, they're not going to they're not going to extend that olive branch. So in one instance, yes, it's who you know, but it's also you have to be someone that they would want to take a chance on, if you will, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Dynamite Mike, podcast that you.
The world about you.
Well, this is fun, man. My name's Romeal Watson, and so right now I got one or two hats that are really, influential as part of my life right now. My main bread and butter right now, I work at the university, and I'm now known as the Associate Director for Employer Relations at Eastern Washington University. So that's a mouthful, and most of that entails external relations with outside professionals. So anybody who wants to connect with Eastern for recruitment purposes of our students, I'm a good point of contact to kind of get them integrated. That's most of what I do. I do that, and then I also set up career fairs and anything that allows for people to have access to the campus. So it's a fun job, rewarding, and can't say enough about it. So it's pretty cool. Yeah, a lot of times with certain jobs, it's you have your end goal in mind, and when you accomplish a project, that's kind of when you can do the celebrations. Well, whereas with mines, there's many different like short and long-term rewards that come about with it. So, anytime a student gets a job, to me, that's a success. So you get all these many stories of people gaining that. And then obviously some of the bigger things are like company partnerships and programs integrating with certain companies. So those are all like big wins, but then there's also the small ones too that I really enjoy. So yeah, well, that's one thing I've learned about life is enjoying the small things. A lot of times people have big milestones and they haven't done it. They haven't arrived until that project has been accomplished. But then, sometimes taking that moment to really think about, okay, what are the small wins that I've accomplished to get there? And I just think it's important not to forget that. They always say like the journey, you know what I mean? And there's some truth to that. Just thinking about, the people you connected with, the people that you inspired along the way to help you get where you're going. And so it's always good to look back and think about those moments where you may have said something that maybe you didn't think resonated with another person, but you find out that it actually did. What I mean? And it got them motivated to do something special in their own lives. To me, those are huge wins, and it's not something to forget when you kind of move forward. Right? Yeah. So that's a long-winded motif, if you will, about my current job and why I like it so much, and so that, but good things end. And so my second hat that I'm massaging at the moment right now is I'm trying to get into the film industry, and so as a screenwriter. And so there's been, again, those small and long-term milestones. And so I've just been working on my craft as a writer. And so far it's been doing pretty well. If I say so myself, I've been having some conversations with Paramount Pictures. And I'm currently having a conversation with an investment group where they fund films. And so they all have their suggestions. And so I'm just kind of going back and forth to get things looking right. And so again, my long-term goal is to finally see it on the big screen. So we'll see how that goes. But again, same thing. The people I talk to along the way, they may be thinking about pursuing an art form of their own choosing, right? And so sometimes hearing you talk about it inspires them to give it a shot themselves. And so for me, again, that's also a huge win. You know, whether I make it or not, the fact that I've been able to inspire others to give it a chance, to me, that's huge. So, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, dang. So going back to the recruiter part.
Yeah.
Yeah, tell me about how did you end up getting a job or a career in Eastern Washington University?
Oh my God, man. I'm a lifer if you could think of it that way, you know. So not to go too far back, but just I'm only bringing it up because it helps I hope that it inspires people to not give up, and that's the reason why I'm bringing it up, because you mentioned military earlier. We were having a slight conversation about it. I almost went to the military. I almost became a Navy man. Fresh out of high school, because at the time I didn't have any schools that had accepted me. I had received a lot of letters of acceptance, like from Yale and some other for football primarily. You know, hey, come to our school and play. But my SAT scores weren't where they were. My GPA was pretty good, but the SATs is what killed me, and so I didn't have any where I got the letters saying they were interested. I was never able to actually get the acceptance from those schools. And so it wasn't until the last minute, man. I think I got like maybe a week. Was it a week? It was pretty close. It was either a week or within a week that I was going to be shipped out to basic training, that I got a letter from Eastern and Portland State finally accepting me into their school, right? But I had to appeal 3 times to get into the school, man. I mean, initially they were like, nope. And I'm like, well, here's what's going on. It was like, nope. And 2 more times. And then finally they're like, okay, we'll take you, but you'll be on a 1-year probation. Yeah. I said, I'll take it. I'm good for it. And so, yeah, man. So that's kind of the story of how I got into Eastern, really, as a student back in 1999. I had to appeal 3 times. 1 year, and then a 1-year probation where I took like student support classes and all that. And from there, 10 years later, man, I got what I could out of it. I tried to play football for a little while and go to school, but anybody who's been an athlete, of some sort knows that it's kind of hard to manage between the meetings and the parties and the focus. It all kind of runs together on you. So I just ended up focusing mostly on schooling. Yeah, so I had to find other passions that got me there. But 10 years, man, 10 years at Eastern. I got an undergraduate in social work, master's degree in social work as well, and then I went on to get another master's in public administration. So double master's.
You have 2 masters.
2 master's degrees and a health administration certification, man. I got more degrees than a thermometer, as they say.
Good for you.
Yeah, man. But I'm saying all that for the first part, hopefully it inspires others to not give up. But then also, I was a student activist on campus, and so that helped me become recognized when I graduated, to get employed by the university. They figured I was there long enough, they might as well just hire me. And that's nice. And so I was lucky enough where the job found me. Mm-hmm. That's one of those ideal situations where word had gotten out that I was looking for employment, and I was actually working at the time when I got the phone call. I was working at a Volunteers of America Crosswalk, which was a teen homeless shelter. That fit within my area focus within my degree. I wanted to work with at-risk kids, and so when I was there for maybe a couple of months, and then got the phone call. They're like, "Hey, I heard you're looking for a job," and I'm like, yeah. Nice. Tell me more. And that was the position with the Career Center, man. Yeah. So I've been there ever since. 16. It'll be 16 years in April. Yeah.
So you got your first master's in what?
Social work.
Social work.
Yeah.
And then your second master's in what?
So also, again, my BSW. So my MSW, sorry, master's in social work. Yeah. So I got 2 of them. So my undergraduate, then master's degree. And I didn't want to get pigeonholed into just working, just being client facing. And so that's why I did the public admin, so I can work administratively if I wanted to, open my own nonprofit or something like that. Yeah. Give me some options.
So, talk about the job market. What does that seem like?
Oof. Depends on the industry.
Yeah,
right?
Let's say tech, right?
Yeah.
Let's just say tech.
Well, it's interesting, because it's booming in certain areas, and then they're kind of working out some kinks in some others, right? Obviously, with AI, it's helping in certain professions, and then it's kind of hurting in some other ones. And what comes to mind is coding, for instance. They use AI for a lot of software coding, and so where initially they thought it was going to revolutionize the coding industry, it turned out that it's causing a lot more work for those in that field because it's creating a lot of generic coding, and they're having to go back in and sort of do a lot of cleanup.
Yeah.
So it's actually creating more problems in that particular field. But for another area, I mean, not necessarily tech, but the technical aspects, like for instance, like the police department, Spokane PD, a lot of their data collection in that sense. I mean, since we're talking about that, things that would normally take them a week to gather data, with around to like, if they're doing reports for folks, for incarceration, whatever. They have to kind of put those reports together and submit them to the state at the end of the year, or quarters. A lot of times AI helps them with going through all that data. What would normally take 6 days might take 2 hours or less to do.
Yeah.
So things like that where in the tech field, they're using it to sort of cut down on on the mundane tasks, meanwhile leaving the specialist to do what they're specialized in, right? And not to get too bogged down in the mundane stuff. So that's kind of where I'm seeing it kind of play into, at least especially with tech. But I'll stop there because I know the folks in the tech field might know a little bit more about how it's impacting. I'm not really sort of immersed in it like that. But that's just from what I've been hearing in terms of where it's fitting. But things get better over the course of every time it's improving. So who knows what it's going to look like 6 months from now, So we'll see. But so far it's kind of a bittersweet. That's what it sounds like anyway. Yeah.
So as a university recruiter,
Yeah.
your job is to get students connected with jobs.
Yeah. Well, in part, my job in particular as employer relations, I'm more of what you call more of a liaison, if you will.
Oh.
Yeah. And so a point of contact. I know a lot of times when employers want to recruit at a university, which honestly, for those who are involved in that, the employers that interact with campuses, they see the benefit, right? But it's more of those that are really consistent in that process, they see the long-term benefits. But, initially it's a little hard getting the employers to see the long-term benefits. They have to kind of go through those necessary steps to kind of see how it all plays out. But the ones who are, they see it, right? And so my job really is to get them as integrated as possible. So, so I'll give you an example. So one company in particular that comes to mind is Fast Enterprises.
Yeah, I know Fast.
Yeah. They've been a long time partner.
Yeah,
of
they've
ours.
been hanging around the campuses for a long time.
Oh yeah, many years. I think they've been working with us before I was even hired, and so they don't just go to the career fairs. They also make time to get tabling on campus during the busy hours. They also work with us to do class visits, to meet with to go to have a captive audience from going from class to class. And so sometimes that's what I'll do is they give me enough notice that they want to come to campus. I'll reach out to faculty and say, hey, Fast wants to come to campus. Do you have time to let them in your class for about 5-10 minutes or whatever to talk a little bit more? And I'll have about 8 to 10 faculty all say, yes, yeah, bring them. And so we'll just fill up their entire day with class visits and then do an info session. And it's interactions like that slowly build the reputation of that industry, of that company in particular. And so once that happens, they become something that students look for, right?
Oh, see, you just answered an interesting question.
Yeah.
Because when I went to Gonzaga University,
Yeah.
they had the Fast people come.
Yeah.
And I always kind of wondered how that went. Did the Fast recruiter, it was always the same blonde-haired woman. Okay, she's probably still doing it. Yeah. I just thought, like, is she going to the professors herself? No, that makes sense. She would go to you, and then you go and coordinate with the professors.
Either way, yeah. If she already has an in with the professors, and cut me out the deal, that's fine too. But primarily it's just for those who don't, maybe they don't have enough time to do that kind of work. They don't want to go from professor to professor themselves because they have other stuff to do. That's what I do. They can just say, "Hey, I want to do it. I want to come to campus," and they just put it in my lap and let me go to work for them. And so, but yeah, that's sort of the wave of where we're getting, and the ones that are further along sort of reap that benefit. But yeah, man, the more they interact, the more they can engage with faculty. And here's sort of where the wave of the future is going for higher education, because right now it's kind of taking a wallop because they've been kind of behind the eight ball in so many different ways. They've just kind of been doing the same thing over and over again, that it's kind of deteriorated people's perspective on the higher education experience, right? And primarily that's just because they've just kind of sat on old practices, you know what I mean? So in a way, higher ed needs to kind of go through a revitalization of how you integrate applied learning with your ordinary everyday student learning, and so traditionally it's always been student goes to class, learn under a professor, get good grades, maybe go to an event or two, and when they graduate, hopefully something's out there, right?
Yeah.
And as we now know that's that's never been the case. There used to be a time where you can just walk into a shop and say, "Hey, are you hiring?" They still have some of that for the smaller mom and pops, but that's just not how things are done anymore. And so you have to kind of have different strategies. And that's sort of what we're seeing now, is that as the outside professional market evolves, how are the universities going to evolve to meet those needs? And so that's kind of where we're going now with applied learning and ways in which we can integrate the professional with the academic, right? And to me, that's sort of the wave of the future. Is now we're getting more into, obviously internships have been talked about for quite a while, and that's going to probably continue to be a thing, but they're also now talking about other ways to get students engaged with getting off the campus. That's what I'm like Indiana Jones a little bit. And he's like, "You got to get out of the classroom." Yeah. And that's always been sort of my, no disrespect to the professors, but that's always been sort of my angle on things, is you take what you're learning in the classroom and you try your best to apply it out in the open field, and kind of find out what's working and what's not working, right? You talk to the outside professionals and they'll tell you, "Oh yeah, we do it this, we use that software program, but we really kind of use this one too, or we don't do this." And it's that back and forth that kind of helps to refine the student. And so that's sort of where we are now, where we're sort of encouraging students themselves to go and to do that process of back and forth. But it's a lot of work for the student, to have to do that. We understand that. And that's part of the training, that we kind of help them understand that that's part of the process of, learning from the classroom, getting off the classroom, things like that. But the new wave now is, how do we bring all parties a little bit closer to where that travel time for the student isn't as rigorous? Because thing with Eastern is a large majority of our students work at the same time. Mm-hmm. So to tell them to go out and get an internship or to go out and do X, Y, and Z on top of work is a bit time consuming for their part. So how do we set up that structure in a way to where, if it can be more integrated with the university structure, they don't have to do as much to get the applied aspects in addition to the academic aspects. And so things like co-teaching, that's something that's being discussed. It's, some schools are already ahead of the curve on that, where, they would bring an outside professional in to co-teach with a professor over the course of that quarter. You know what I mean? Cool. Yeah. And so that way, they would have a particular day where, maybe the academic professor will talk for a couple times a week, and then a professional will come in and do the second half of the week, or they might do it at the same time. It just depends on how that looks. But that's really sort of a wave of the future in terms of how do you bring both arenas together in the same space. And so, yeah, there's schools that are sort of leading the charge on that. Like the Wake Forest Career Centers, and a few others that they're kind of cutting edge when it comes to setting things up like that. And so, but yeah, that's where things are going. And so hang in there for those who are thinking about the college experience. But right now, I would say to anybody who's thinking about going to college, if you're going to go, it's important to know what you're going to go in there for. So do some of the prep work going in about what is it you actually want to do. And if you don't know, let it come in with something, some kind of general idea, because then we can, or maybe a general theme of what you want to do. Like if you want to help children, you may not know exactly what major at that particular moment, but you might want to help children. That's a good start, because then we can help you figure out what majors might help complement that, And so, and that's another learning aspect of it too, is that we're trying to get, we're kind of getting out of this concept of like, what do I major in?
Yeah.
And more so, what sets of disciplines from certain programs can help me get to where I need to go to. Because if you want to work with kids, for instance, there's more than one way to do that. It's not just social work or psychology or children's studies. You might also work with children as a music major.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point.
You know what I mean? Or even a biology major. I know one of the things that's popular now with kids are like the Regio schools and all that stuff. We're really,
okay.
So it's all, it's like another alternative to the Montessori school. You know what I mean? And so we for those who are already familiar with Montessori schools, they have the Regio schools, where essentially we base the child's learning off of their interest. So they just kind of, there's a process where they just kind of let the kid sort of like, they put them out and let them kind of roam free a little bit. Mm-hmm. And whatever they gravitate to, whether it's digging a hole in the ground, or it's writing on the chalkboard or something like that, they take that assessment and base their learning around what they naturally gravitate to. And that's sort of essentially kind of the practice, So, so rather than just forcing an interest down their throat and they may not like it, let them be the ones that kind of sort of guide their own learning. So that, that's kind of where I wouldn't necessarily call it a regular approach, but that's sort of the idea is that if you come in with a general idea, we can help you sort of focus in on, here are your options of disciplines that can help you achieve the goal that you want, and in which way. Yeah. And so these are ways in which we're refining the higher ed experience. And, so that's what I would tell anybody, or any parent who's has kids going, have their children getting ready to go, and is to help them think long and hard about what that will be, and to come through their career center as soon as possible. In part because, academic advising is great, but it serves a certain purpose. Primarily, they help you figure out what classes to take, and occasionally, if they're really good at what they do, they might say what teachers they recommend. But it's mostly centered around the academic, environment, right? Whereas if you work with the career centers, they're going to help you decide how the major you choose, or sets of discipline you choose, how does it translate into the industry that you want to go into. And to me, that's just as, if not more important than knowing what you want to major in, because there's always that underlying question of, okay, now what are you going to do with it? And what part of the industry, and in what way do you want to be effective in what you want to do? Those are all like very, very important questions, because you might want to work with kids, but how and in what way? And then, are you preparing yourself skill-wise to meet those demands, right? And so being deliberate in that way is what's going to make you the most effective student transitioning out. And we have seniors that haven't answered those questions. Graduate students that haven't answered them. And it's an unfortunate revelation. And there's some internal politics that have unfortunately created that, careers. I would say anybody who's worked in a career center at a university would probably agree with this, but I would say nationwide, we've always been kind of treated as sort of a third leg, a rickety third wheel. You know what I mean? It's like we've always been tertiary. on in terms of what they felt was important for the university. They was like, okay, go to class, get good grades, and when you get ready to graduate, you want to go see the career center to get your resume reviewed and all that kind of stuff. We were always sort of like a last hurrah for the student, and huge mistake, because what we were finding also was that students were getting 2 weeks before graduation and they wanted us to review their resume and cover letter.
Yeah.
And once we had the conversation with them, they find out that, oh man, after thinking about it, I don't really want to do this. After putting more thought into their future in terms of what to expect, right? And so, gosh, how nice it would have been if we could have caught them in their freshman or sophomore year. How much more time they would have had to evolve that thought, right? But here they are 2 weeks before graduation, and they have to kind of do all this, do the crash course at the last minute. Sad story, not uncommon, and it happens more than you know. And I think that's part of the refinement that we are trying to address. And so, but it's taking time, in part because part of what we're up against too is faculty. They're union contracted, and they have their own set of expectations that they've already agreed upon. And so really for us, it's a matter of finding the champions, the faculty that are champions that are willing to go above and beyond what's required in their contracts. And even reshaping those contracts, which again, that's outside of my pay grade, but that's stuff that, that hopefully will change the landscape of the higher ed experience. But yeah, those are some of the uphill things it's administrative mumbo jumbo that kind of gets in the way in a way of changing the landscape of what that looks like. Yeah. So.
Yeah, that's important to solidify your major after that first 2 years. I mean, you got those first 2 years to try to figure that out.
Yeah.
And I had the same issue too at Gonzaga, because they had us go to the career center like the last semester, it seemed like. But either way, I didn't take advantage of everything the university had to offer.
I didn't either. I did an internship before I knew what an internship was. Someone was like, "Hey, you want to do an internship?" And I'm like, "What's that?" And this was in my graduate program. I was already a grad student by then, and so I missed all my undergrad.
Dang, you were already a grad student by the time you figured out an internship.
It lucked out because I was still active in other ways, and that's how I was able to meet people. And so, usually if you're active that way, you're going to find something. But I wasn't deliberate at all about my career trajectory, and I would easily say I kind of got lucky in that, I just happened to meet some people that took a liking to me, and they liked what I was doing, and they wanted me a part of what they were doing. And so I lucked out in that way. But man, I think back if I was more deliberate in that moving forward, we probably wouldn't be having this conversation, because I'd have been somewhere else doing what I was dreaming about. I should say it that way. Not that I don't appreciate where I am now, but I'm sure we can all agree that if we could close our eyes and imagine where we would like to be, it probably wouldn't be where we are.
Yeah.
So, but that's pretty accurate, man. Yeah. So anyway, hang in there for y'all. Hang in there in the meantime. We've heard that trade schools are always they're definitely being a conversation, especially since they're a lot more affordable, and community colleges, even with I believe that we're probably about 3 years into this now. I believe the state had a lot of mandates around career development and how students are being trained for the job for the job market. And so they forked over a lot of money over, I think, with Washington Spark, for instance, and there's a few other state-funded programs where most of that money primarily went to the community colleges, but it was done with the sole purpose of giving them the resources to be able to adequately train the next set of the next workforce. You know what I mean? And so, our school, I don't think our school got a chance to take advantage of it, because again, it's all about what structures do you have in place to be able to adequately use the state funding if it were to come your way. Like they're not going to give you funding if, like for instance, they're like, if we get the money, we're going to use it to fund unpaid internships for students. Commendable, but the state's going to be like, nah, we're not going to pay for that. And
That's kind of funny.
Yeah, I mean, in their mind, it's kind of, they wouldn't call it a rat hole, but it's sort of like, we want something that's going to be sustainable over time. Build a program so that students can get filtered in through that program and go through some sort of a development process. That's more of what they were looking for, and unfortunately Eastern and a few other schools for that matter just didn't have an answer for it, whereas the community colleges did, because that's kind of part of their landscape is to have readiness programs and things like that. So they already had certain things in place that would do that. And so the funding just meant that they could actually hire more staffing and hone in on the programming, make it much more efficient than what it was. And so, again, that's honestly, that's where the 4-year institutions can definitely learn from the 2 years, from the community colleges in that respect. If they can figure out a way to trade some best practices around that, the 4 years would be better off, to be doing that. But I think so much of it right now is, we got a lot of research institutions for that matter. Eastern's not a research institution, but I'll say this, even though Eastern's not a research institution, we have a lot of professors that teach their courses much like a research institution. You know what I mean? They train their students, unfortunately, they train their students to be the next professor.
Yeah.
And we all know that's not the reality, and that's a lot of the data that we've been collecting over time is to say, hey, professors, do you know where your students are going when they graduate? You know what kind of work they're doing? And they scratch their head, but they're not being professors, that's for sure. And that's how you're training them to go and maybe take your place at another school. Like philosophy majors, they're going out they're working for auto sales industry.
That sucks.
They're not. They're not. It is what it is.
It is what it is.
They
chose that.
They do their, not to knock the industry. They do well. Because and here's the thing: they do well in those positions because of their ability to relate to the customer.
Yeah.
To talk about life issues and relate it in a way that makes them feel comfortable making a sale, which is in essence what customer service is really about. It's about how the customer feels after the sale, not during the sale.
Yeah.
When they go home and they sit with what they go home and they sit with what they've purchased and they say, yeah, I think this was the right decision.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or if you go buy a shirt from the shop, if you go buy a shirt, a professional shirt, and you go talk to one of the specialists there and you're like, hey, how do I look in this shirt? And they're like, oh yeah, you look fantastic. Yeah, you could definitely wear it with this blue tie. And then you get home and you look at it and you're like, he just said that I look like a clown. Why did he even tell me? It's like when you get home and you think about that, that's what's left behind. That's what's left. You know what I mean? And so much of our culture, unfortunately, is that way. We're not focusing on the actual relationship of the person that we're making a sale with, right? And so in essence, a lot of your philosophy majors do well in sales for that reason. So, but again, the faculty members, they don't know that because they don't look at the data. Yeah. and we do the data collection, and part of that data collection is us being able to be deliberate in our approach when we talk to faculty about how they're training students, right? And that same thing goes to employers we do surveys. We survey every event that we do where employers are there because we want to know, like, what are their needs and how can we deliver that need? How can we best transfer that understanding to faculty so they can decide how they want to retrain students to meet those needs. You know what I mean? So we're doing that in the data world of how do you transfer all that and get it to the correct party so we can make adjustments. And that's just one instance in which we're trying to do that. So we're doing that in the data world. We're doing that in the tech world, and we're just doing it just flat out, in person as well through interactions. And so that's sort of the nature of what we're up against. But in the meantime, those are some strategies that I would say if you got kids going to college. So, yeah.
It's an important job.
Yeah.
And it's something that I think about too, like higher education and what's the real value of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Certain degrees, I mean, clearly certain degree fields have more value, but
Yeah.
it all has value because college is supposed to be a transformational experience
Yeah.
where you learn how to learn and get into the habit of being a lifelong learner.
Absolutely.
And I feel that a lot of people, they go to college too early. And it's like in college too early is almost like a prolonging of adolescence. But what they're missing, one thing they're missing that's huge is it's like going to the gym, right? When you get in these good habits of reading and just cramming yourself with books, and then you quit. And then you quit thinking.
Right.
And that's the worst part is, you got all these educated adults here in America that are just so dumb because they just gave up their thinking to something else.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, absolutely. Or what you call the paralysis of analysis.
Yeah, paralysis by analysis.
So there's two ways of looking at it. They're burned out because there's other distractions that get their attention. But then also too, there's so much information out there that they literally just shut down. They're just like, okay, there's always that saying, like if I would, some people, if I really was looking after my safety, I wouldn't get out of bed in the morning. People say that sometimes, and a lot of times education is a lot like that. They know so much that they talk themselves out of a good opportunity.
Oh yeah,
They outthink the opportunity, and gosh, there's so many instances like that in my experience. I've seen people who are sharp, they're really, really smart, but they're too smart for their own good sometimes, too smart to a fault, because they overthink the way opportunities work. It's not what you know, it's who you know. You know what I mean? Like we've thrown that around a lot, and a lot of times that just comes seared in people's brains. And so they kind of shut down at the thought that, well, it doesn't really matter who I know because so-and-so knows so-and-so and they're going to pull some strings and they're going to get the job over me anyway. So why should I try? Right. So that thought lingers out there, and there's still some truth to that. But there's another side of that conversation too, which is this. The person, that person that person you do know that you're hoping will vouch for you and get you a job, you still have to know some things to be able to be relied upon, because it's like they're vouching for you to, they're representing you in a sense to say, okay, this person's good. I give my blessing for you to give them a chance at something. Now, if you don't got what it takes, again, they're not going to they're not going to extend that olive branch. So in one instance, yes, it's who you know, but it's also you have to be someone that they would want to take a chance on, if you will, if that makes sense. Yeah. So it gets right back to that competency, and but again, they have to tell the full story. They have to give the full context. Otherwise, you risk people just not putting their best foot forward. Why try if this is going to be the outcome, right? And that comes from people not telling half truths, if you will. That's probably the best way to say it, And so, yeah, that's that.
Yeah, I feel you. I do the same thing, especially when funny recruiters, like I'll get some recruiters that'll hit me up.
Yeah.
And the first thing I do is I try to discredit the recruiter. I'm like, you're not real. You're not a real recruiter. You're fake. Look at the email.
Yeah.
Oh, that's some Gmail thing. That's not like, oh, you're trying to run a scam on me.
It feels very Mary Kay, right? Very, very Amway, doesn't it? It's like, you can be as successful as me if only you sell enough candy bars or enough soaps and deodorants. You can be Ponzi scheme-ish or whatever.
Now it's really scammy and spammy, and I wish it wasn't.
Yeah, I mean, we've had our dealings with multi-level marketing, and so we don't deter them. We just make sure that we bring out the understanding of it. Whereas other schools, they've banned multi-level marketing companies entirely. I'm not going to name them because I don't really want to disparage them, because there are some that are good, and I'll say good in this sense. They're good in the general sense, but sometimes regionally they may have a management crew that doesn't run it effectively, and it kind of gives the rest of the organization a black eye. So at its core, they mean well, but sometimes they hire the wrong people that do the wrong things with the wrong clientele.
Yeah, for sure.
I'll say it that way. But it's not the most commendable, I should say, because it's door-to-door sales, and it's hard. It's very challenging work because of people's financial situations. They don't want people in privacy. They don't want people knocking on their doors asking them to buy.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I can't even say the product because that will give up the company. But but you get my point. Yeah. So, but we don't. Yeah. Many universities have banned them, primarily because of the treatment of the students, and some have kept it open because they may have had better experiences with them,
Damn, I didn't even realize that those multi-level marketers were trying to pull that shit on campus.
Oh yeah, they've been doing it for a while.
Ooh, that would definitely that would piss me off. I wasn't even thinking about that. I'm just thinking about other recruiters trying to hustle you into fake jobs.
Oh yeah,
to try to get your data, basically.
Oh yeah, there's that too. Yep.
Yeah, there's just a lot of hustlers out there. There's a lot of scammers, a lot of fake jobs. It's like, how do you know what's real? And I suffer the same thing when I go to a job board and I look at it and I think of all the reasons why I shouldn't apply to it.
Right.
And then looking at the data of all of the jobs I applied to and how many I didn't get at all. It's
right.
Like, ooh, man, I wonder if I would have a better opportunity to doing door-to-door sales.
Right.
I'd probably sell more.
So many variables, man, in that, and you're right. You're right to be critical to an extent, right? Mm-hmm. I would also say too is just being a little bit more understanding of what's at play, not necessarily for them, but for yourself.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It helps to at least put your mind at ease. I know there's desperation. I need a job. I need money. I got bills to pay. So there's still that emotion there. But just something to provide a little bit of solace, in that chaos that's going in people's brains, because we're talking 150 applicants to one job at least, right? Yeah. And they all have different levels of experience. Some have PhDs applying for jobs that definitely don't require a PhD, but that's just kind of how the job market is in some respects, where sometimes people just want a job that requires something very basic. I had someone people get turned down all the time for was considered overqualified. Like, why would I hire you? You got to
threaten my position.
Right.
That's
those kind of
literally
things.
What they're saying.
I can't, exactly. There's those internal politics. Yep. But even still, it's like, okay, you have a double master's and you want to work at a freight trucking industry, company. Why would I hire you to do this? Because clearly you're way more educated. This would be boring for you. Why do you even want to do this job? Can we retain you? I think is one of the questions they have. It's like, this is going to bore you to all get out, and you'll probably be gone within a year. Like, why should we even waste our time hiring you, right? But they never consider the fact that the person probably wants that. They probably had enough of corporate or had enough of the higher ed experience, and they just want something that pays decent, and they can go home to their kids. They don't have to take their work home with them at night. You know what I mean? And they just want something real straightforward, even Steven, right? and for a lot of people, that's fine. They ran the mill, and they just like, you know what? I'd rather just do the paperwork. Just let me do the paperwork, so I don't have to think about it. And so, but anyway, getting back to that, but that's sort of there are and then there's also internal hires too, that they already have people in mind for the job, but legally they have to post the position, those kind of things too. And so those are real challenges to the job market that can take the wind out of the sail of people who apply. I get that 100%. And so really we just talk about strategy, strategy, but more so in addition to strategy, because I find that a lot of people that I work with, they're doing most of the stuff right, most of it. They might need to tweak the resume. That's the big one. A lot of times it's tweaking their resume to where it fully articulates their experience. A lot of times people downplay their experience. They'll say, I was a barista, and that wasn't a big deal. You know what I mean? They don't really highlight that much on their resume. And we're just like, huh? You do realize that that's the stuff that corporate and all these big companies, they pay hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to train people on how to deal with other people.
Yeah, that's true.
And if you're a barista and you work at restaurants, you work in food services, that's what you do every day is you deal with multiple personalities, multiple needs and wants. And I want 2% milk here. I want oat milk for this and just a splash of ginger. You deal with that kind of stuff every day that, they find that when they hire those folks and then they train them up to the specific skills that they need, they end up doing quite well. But the unfortunate part, which is kind of where we're at right now, are the degrees. And so we're finding that a lot of those positions that would be totally doable with someone without a degree, high school diploma could do this job. We'll find that the job is requiring a bachelor's degree or a master's degree. And when you look at the job description, you're like, you do not need a master's degree to do this job.
Yeah.
And the state's cracking down on that too. That's something
that's good.
That's something that came. I don't know how well this is. I think this might be spreading to the state at like all different industries as a whole. Maybe, I'm not quite sure, but I know specifically with higher ed, that's something that's coming. Is that the governor is going to be doing a statewide assessment on these positions and looking to see, okay, does this require a bachelor's degree to do this job? If it doesn't, then take it off the job description. Get rid of it, and so that's something that's coming. So, we'll see how far that gets, what kind of pushback will happen. But I think that that's a much needed adjustment, to be honest with you, because I don't think I need a master's to do my job, to be honest with you. You just need somebody who's outgoing, that's not afraid to get out into the public and talk to industry. You definitely don't need a master's to do what I'm doing. So, so anyway, that's light at the end of the tunnel. But again, these are people's lives we're talking about, so they got to get a move on it.
Yeah, and it sucks because I don't think a human being is supposed to put up with that much rejection when it comes to applying for a job. Yeah. And that's really crappy. Yeah. I think, the market has a way of self-correcting. I have a feeling the degree will, if you look at Bureau of Labor and Statistics, the person with the degree makes more money than the person without the degree. Right. Yep. It's just going through this reformation right now. Yeah. And part of the reformation I'm seeing in the tech world is people are wanting to go for these certifications. Yeah, yeah. And eventually, I think the degrees will come back. But
yeah, you said something very interesting just now, which was money. Yeah. So it's going to be interesting to see where it goes, but I think that might be the central influencer to this is money. And so it's going to be important to watch this close because it's like as those positions start to get rid of the degree requirement, will the money follow? And so really is this just a push to get people into these higher positions but still pay them less? And if that's the question, then we really need to make sure we put the kibosh on that too.
Yeah, for sure.
Because as the cost of living goes up, I don't know about you. Did the same subject? My premiums went up for my car insurance doubled over the course of 2 years. I don't know about you. Did yours increase?
Yeah.
Oh my God! Right? So I'm on the 6-month plan, and I'm like, ooh, and I'm just saying, even with that and health insurance and all those kind of things, everything's going up, and you're talking about, okay, great, you're gonna get rid of the degree requirement so people can get these higher end positions, but if the money's not gonna follow, come on now.
Yeah.
So that's the one thing I'm kind of worried about is a lot of times the impetus to do certain things is to get more with less. And that's the wrong way to go about it. And it's going to ultimately blow up. It's not gonna come to much if that's gonna be the intent. So pay people, pay them well, and you'll get the return.
Yeah. Well, I like Eastern Washington University. My sister went there.
Nice.
Do you spend more time at the main campus or the satellite?
Yeah, mostly the main campus.
Yeah.
We try our best to interact with the downtown campus. I know I do personally, because that was one of our goals, was to show the Catalyst building some love, because it's kind of off to the side, and we have this 20-year lease with them, and so we've already signed in with that. So we're in with them for about another, I don't even know how long we've been with them so far, but I know we got another decade with them. So we're there, we're in it, and so we just got to figure out how to maximize that time and get the most out of it. So, but yeah, well, I try my best, and so I know they do a lot of like welcome back celebrations, and I know here's the big one, is that they do like they have the College of Business that's down there. They do the business lecture series, and so you went to the last one where we had David Condon, the mayor, who was a guest lecturer there, and so they've been doing that for 2 years now. They try every quarter they have a major speaker to talk about their industry insights, right? And so that's just one example of what they're trying to do down at Catalyst to get some circulation down there, which is wonderful. We've talked about doing some career fairs down there. I know in the past I've talked about doing like a long time ago I kind of got burned out because I was like the only person like doing it really. I used to do career conferences where we would bring in all these employers. I'll bring in 60 some odd employers to do morning sessions. And then from
Good
there,
for you.
Yeah. We talk about we would just talk about
hustling. 60
Oh man, it helped. I mean, it helps. I was intern coordinator for that many years, so it helped to have access to those contacts. So I just kind of reached out to a lot of the people who were already doing internships anyway. It made it easy for me to just do mass emails and get them to volunteer. But yeah, I did like 7 career conferences, and where we do morning sessions, about 4 to 5 sessions, and for each hour, and then we do a lunch keynote and then a career fair at the end. And those were always great because it gave students a chance to talk to the professionals. To me, that's always been the biggest thing for me, which is whatever you want to do, talk to the professionals that are doing it. And get their insight on how to do it, what to look out for, if they made mistakes, what were the mistakes they made, and what advice would they have for the upcoming professionals.
The camera died, so that's fine.
Yeah.
That's fine, because I run it. Let's get that out.
That was it?
Well, no, it's still going.
Oh, is it? Oh, okay.
Yeah, we still got 30 minutes.
Oh, nice.
No, just the camera goes blank, and that's fine, because then it just goes black. It's all black, because it's just audio. Right now.
Oh, I see.
And so we still keep going with the podcast.
Yeah.
So it's another cool thing I like about it, because like you automatically feel different when the camera's off and the lights are off. It's just a different, because that's another cool thing. That's why I like the podcast after the video, because it usually gets
the lights did sound. It's like some reverse Men in Black with me. When the lights hit, I didn't know what I was going to talk about before you hit the lights, and then once you asked that question, I was like, okay, I think I'm talking too much.
No, you're doing great. You're doing great.
So thank you, man. I appreciate it. But that's my world. And for the longest, even before, cause I've only been in this job for 3 years. My job prior to that, I was doing internships. I did internship coordinating for 13 years. So I was helping students get internships and working with companies to provide them. And then I was also a career advisor. So I ran the gamut in terms of like serving students and giving them the best advice that I could think of to help them navigate, right? And so that's just, and not much has changed since the time that I've been doing my job. And so that's just the advice that I give people is, if you want to do something great, talk to the people who are doing things great, right? Talk to the professionals that are doing it and try your best. I know some people might be introverted, but do your best to try to get out of your shell to talk to folks that do that, even if it's an email, or a voicemail or something like that, whatever you can do to get the information you need to make the best educated decision on your future. do that. Because again, bringing it back to the higher ed experience, it's important because if you're going to college thinking you're going to get that, you're only halfway accurate, right?
Yeah.
I would say even less, in part because a lot of the professors are career professors. They've been out of the industry for quite a while, and most of the information that they get is research based, right? And so you're just kind of getting it from you're getting it secondhand information from someone who's just been researching it for quite a while. Still good information, but you want people that got feet on the ground every day, that's telling you how things are changing, how it's evolving, where it's going. And if you don't plug into folks like that by getting out into the, and that's the thing about the career fairs too. It's not necessarily about finding a job at that moment. It's also about having those conversations and building those relationships with the professionals to get information, and that's really the key. Is you want information to be able to make the best decisions about what's next for you in your life, right? And sometimes you need the most relevant information as possible, and that's why, like anything, back when back when I was really big in my student activism, grassroots was always the way to go. Because by the time it got to the media, it was already spun. They already spun it to their own whatever they wanted to get out of it. So, grassroots in this instance is always the way to go. Talk to the professionals directly. Talk to a lot of them because they all have different opinions based on what they do and what they're seeing. And pay attention to the patterns. A lot of them might be saying the same things, and so if they do, then you can kind of put a pin in that and say, hey, this must be true, because they're all kind of saying it. They're saying similar aspects of the same thing, and that's part of it too. Is the information you get. How do you filter it in a way that doesn't make your head explode?
Yeah.
You compartmentalize the information you get, and that's part of what I used to work with students on, was how to organize the information you get, because that's really what the university is. It's not necessarily a professional development site, although that's part of it. It's really an information hub. That's really what it is. And it's the job of the student to go through this process, obviously, but again, this is where we get left out of the conversation. You're going through this higher education process with a deliberate mindset of how to compartmentalize the information that you're getting. And so when I would work with students, I would show them how to organize their thoughts and their information as they get it, and I had 3 categories usually. My first category usually was the demographic, like what demographic or what industry do you want to serve, right? And so they would figure out, okay, I want to be in the sports industry. Once they identify that, then you have to kind of come up with, my second stage on that was, what are 5 different challenges or breakthroughs that you would like to further investigate, because we're talking about solving problems too. So even if you want to go in the sports industry, what are some problems you'd like to solve within that industry, right? And that's your first step, is to figure that out. And from there, we go to the second step, which is, now that you know what industry or what demographic you want to work with, and you've already identified problems, the next step is, what do you actually want to do to solve those problems? And so now we're talking about certain kinds of skill sets. Are you going to be a data collector? You're going to be a marketer, advertising? Are you going to write grants, to get money for those types of endeavors? Are you going to do podcasts to spread information about the industry, to get people more educated about how to move forward in that particular space? Like, there's all different kind of ways that you can be active in solving the problems that you've already had in mind, right? Then the third section beyond that is, and here's the big one, the one that people often fumble the ball on, is, what are you doing to keep yourself relevant in that field?
True.
Are there professionals you're linked with that do you have a mentor? Are there sets of professionals that you can reach out to kind of keep you accountable, for one, but also help you stay refined on how things are changing, right? And so again, the university is really sort of the academy on how to build that. but no one ever talks about it because they don't have the right people in the room to talk about it.
Yeah, correct.
And that's the big issue. Because that's exactly what I would say if they had me in the room. But I'm lower on the totem pole. I don't have, the PhD, unfortunately. That's what the PhD gets you. That's where it gets you in the room sometimes with the professionals who only really acknowledge you if you have a PhD.
Yeah.
That's what it does.
that.
So that's not nothing, but that's where it gets. But for those who for the time where I'm in the room and I can make that point, that's the point that I make is, now that you have all this information, because I've seen this wouldn't be the first time I've seen 4.0 students that have excelled in just about almost every aspect, and then when they get to that final step of how do they articulate their experiences in a professional way? Do they have mentors? Do they have professionals that they can call upon to give them advice? Do they have they done any applied learning to gain them experience in a particular area? I mean, specialized experience. That's what makes for instance, that's what makes internships different from just a regular job. Mm-hmm. It's a specific job to satisfy, to obtain a specific skill set. That's why but do you have that? Have you volunteered? Do you attend conferences? You know what I mean? Again, all these things are about how you get out of the classroom and off campus to talk to professionals to get another set of information to help you refine what you already know. You can trim the fat, if you will. And it's that third step, unfortunately, that a lot of people kind of fall through the cracks. And that's primarily because of the fact that their career centers are pushed to the side the way that they are.
I agree. And
Yep.
It's crazy because a lot of these students, to include myself, I suffered this delusion and I'm glad I got over it. But they think that, if I get a degree, that means I have a ticket to the upper class.
Right.
That's what they think. And man, are they wrong? It's hard. It's like you get the information.
Yep.
It's on you to do the work. And what's great is not once have you mentioned go to a job board.
Well,
No, you are all about networking.
Well, that's 60 to 80% of how people get the job.
Yeah.
I mean, the job boards aren't nothing. That still gives you about 10 to 15%. So you still have to exercise that. But here are the other things too. Again, we're going back to being deliberate. The job boards do at least explain to you what it's going to take to get that job.
Yeah.
So even as you're looking at it, you do your own inventory based off of what they need for you to get the job versus what you have, and you kind of cross-reference that, but it also informs you about, okay, they want this to get that job. Do I have that? No. How can I get it? Right, fork over more money probably and more time to go to another class.
Get
whatever.
another certification.
Whatever, yeah, right. So at least it helps you with that. And I guess the problem for me is they should have led with that, right? And they should have led with that a long time ago in the educational system. They should have had that conversation in high schools, at the community colleges, and in the 4-year institutions. They should have led with that, and that's what I'm trying to change. That's the conversations I'm trying to have, and hopefully, and I'm not the only one, right? There's thousands of people in my position that are thinking the same way, but we're all kind of suffering from the same situation, which is, career center, you go see them at the end, type of thing. Oh, that's cute. Job, we oftentimes have to battle the arts, if you will. The folks that believe going to college is for existential, realization, spiritual uplift. That's great. There's the student life component to that, where you find friends and you get married and you find your true self. There is that, right? It all has to be summarized into something. It all has to be solidified into something. It doesn't have to be, but it's nice if it is, right? There's no guarantee that, it's not saying that you're going to transition in the 4 years. That's what they want you to think. They want you, 4 years, you got a job lined up and you're already working within 6 months, right? That's kind of a pipe dream, but so there is that reality, but it's I say this, it's kind of like parenting in a way. It's like you train your child to be a certain way, right? You give them values, you give them work ethic, you give them understanding of the world, you give them an emotional wherewithal to be able to withstand that rigor of being wrong and things not going their way, right? You try to instill these kinds of characteristics and values in your children. You know that once they get to a certain age, that they're going to veer off that path a little bit and do their own thing. They're going to go to the parties and they're going to try to sneak out at night. They're going to try to kiss the boy or girl behind the portables and all that kind of stuff. You just kind of know they're going to do that, but you hope that A, they don't get in so much trouble that it's hard that they can't come back from it. That's the first one. And you hope that, and you just hope that those values that you've instilled, they're going to be there inside somewhere and they can always come back to it at some point. It's going to be there to kind of keep them in line. Like, you guys are going to go where? Sounds like fun, man. I'm going to go over here today. That's not really my vibe. You know what I mean? Like those values are going to keep you, grounded in some way. That's what most parents at least hope, right? They're not expecting their kids to be saints, but they're expecting them to be disciplined. Right? And we kind of operate the same way where, we don't expect things to be perfect, but we want to be able to create a solid enough foundation to where they can apply this stuff when they leave. That's our be all end all goal. Will we catch flack for it? Sure. Is it going to be perfect? No. Are there going to be angry parents? How come I pay this X amount of money and my kid didn't get X, Y, Z? I think that's inevitable because everyone develops at different times. And sometimes students go to college because their parents told them to and not because they really wanted to go or that they were ready to go. Right. So there's all that, but we want to try to tip the scales in the positive sense as much as possible, so. Yep. But, here, who's that does this? I think this is is this Korea that does this? There's a few places where they have the 2-year mandate, right? Once you graduate high school, you got to do public service for 2 years.
Oh, yeah.
You see what I mean?
Yeah, compulsory service.
Yeah.
That's a pretty common thing in many countries.
See? I'm not opposed to that, to be honest with you.
Yeah,
it might
I agree.
And so it might solve our employment problems a little bit, God forbid you still got to pay them, right? But it's not. It's. I find it funny. It's just or ironic, I should say it this way. Is we kind of look at other countries and we kind of scoff at their practices sometimes. 2-year mandatory 2-year service, and then you find 10 years down the line where it's like, 10-year service. It's kind of like that with they made fun of Amsterdam and all that stuff for having legal marijuana, and it's like. Yeah, they make it legal and they tax it. Well, who makes it legal? What kind of civilized place does that? And then here we are, right? Yep. It's just like make it legal and tax it, right? And so, I mean, I'm not, different comparison, but same kind of rotation. It doesn't hurt to model other places. Doesn't mean you're inefficient. It just means, you're being educated in terms of figuring out what works best for the climate, you know what I mean? And so, hey, maybe we should think about it. I don't know what that's going to look like, but it can't hurt to look at it. So anyway, that's what I got, man. What do you think?
Well, I think it's good. And let's go into your writing. What sort of state do you get into before you start writing?
Man, so I'll segue this a little bit differently. So I'm going to reattach myself to what I was talking about previously because
No worries.
The reason being is because I also like to tell people I don't like to be like preachy about these kinds of things because there's already a disconnect because I didn't realize this, but I didn't realize that how fast you get older. Your parents tell you this stuff. Your uncles tell you it's gonna be. They always say that. They say it's gonna be over like that. And next thing you know, you're gonna be 45 with a beard, and you're gonna have an achy back, and your joints are gonna be. They always say that. I heard it all the time growing up, and you never think it's gonna be you until it is. And here we are, folks. I'm the old guy in the room. I'm the old head in the room telling kids to brush their teeth. And it's a very different feeling. Obviously, I know y'all tried to tell us. I apologize, but I'm listening now. You can tell us about what it's like at the age now. What it's going to feel like to get even older, right? I'll be listening a lot more clear than I was before. All right. But, so part of me is rebranding that a little bit too. Yes, I'm older, but I prefer to think of myself as sort of like the cool uncle or the older brother, that's 10 years apart or more, right? It kind of helps me stay youthful and stay relevant with the demographic a little bit. But one of the ways that I do that too is also to let them know that I'm not just telling you this stuff just to be telling it to you. I'm also doing things on my own too. I'm applying these very same skills for myself. And they work for me. And I know that might sound anecdotal, but it doesn't hurt to investigate to see if it might work for you too, right? And that's really the name of the game, is once you have all this information, you figure out what works and what doesn't work, right? Yeah. And it's not to say that it doesn't work in general. It just doesn't work for you. There might be other things that you might need to apply. And it's, we're all kind of like wizards in our own way, right? We have our own little potions and spells. And a lot of times it's sort of based off of our personality, the way we do things. And so that's our job, to kind of figure out how to piece all that together to make it make sense for us. And so, but anyway, that's what I talk to people about. It's like, hey, I'm applying this stuff too. I'm trying to go to Hollywood, and I'm trying to pitch, and pitch my ideas just like you try to pitch yourself at an interview. You know what I mean? And I'm trying to network, and gosh, there's no other networking. I mean, networking in Hollywood it's its own beast, to be honest with you, because there's so much that goes into it. It's like not just a good idea, but it's who are you as a person. It goes back to everything we talked about. It's sort of like we're the salesman, and it's kind of put on the reverse. Whereas in our traditional setting, it's the job looking for the employee, but in that world, it's the employee trying to sell themselves full on for the job. And and it's still kind of that way even in the job market traditional sense. It's like you're in the interview, you got to sell yourself, right? There's still that part of it, but there's not that vacuum on the outside. You can stay where you are, and not get anything. And so Hollywood, it's very much that when you approach people, there's some good things about it too, and I'll get that in a second. But that's the part of it. It's like everyone's a salesman. Yeah. They all have multiple hustles that they're involved in, and so when I go to LA and I talk to people, all very friendly, right? And I'll get to that in a second, and the reasons for why I think that is. But they all have multiple things they're into, right? They're doing real estate on the side. They got insurance. They're doing. They have a little construction business that they help their parents out with. And I'm just like, they have 5 different things. I'm like, dang, dude, I'm just like doing my regular. Yeah. I'm doing my regular job, and you got 5 things.
They have to make a living in Southern California, man. It's prices of housing and cost of living there.
So they have that, and then they also just sort of have like, there is that, because there's that salesmanship that's naturally sort of embedded in the relationships there. There's that natural defense that comes up when you try to engage with people. And so like here in Washington, like when we talk with people, there's still that nuance, like, oh, call me later. You really don't want them to call you. There's still sort of that thing going on, but it's very much a thing, and it's like when you talk to them, it's like they're going through the motions of what you're saying, and they're kind of filtering out what you're saying for opportunity. You know what I mean? And that's if you're lucky. Any other time, it's sort of like, okay, what do you want from me?
Right.
That's usually the impetus, right? When you're talking, they're waiting for the need. Like, okay, great, all this talking. What do you want me to do? What do you need from me? Yada yada, yeah, blah 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 blah. What do you need from me? Type of thing, and that's the vibe you get. But they still have to go through that process, because what if that thing you need is actually what you need, right? And so they have to play this game of everyone being interesting, because you don't know who they are and who they're connected to.
Yeah, that'll burn me out quick too.
Oh, my goodness.
Especially in big networking events.
There's a pro and a con to that, right? The for me anyway, the positive thing to that I like, unfortunately, or fortunately, is that they have to believe you're someone before they find out that you're nothing.
Yeah.
That sucks to say it like that, but that's the natural process.
Ooh, that's a good way to put it. They have to think you're somebody before they find out you're nobody.
Right.
Of course.
And so they have to play it like that until they find out enough information, and they're like, you don't. They just listen. They listen enough to know, oh, they're lower on the totem pole than me. Or and so there's that. But I'd rather have that part. That's the thing about it. It's the fakeness of it, right? People call it fake, and there's that aspect of it. But at the same time, it's like I would rather have that than the alternative, which is them to assume you don't know, you're nothing, and you having to prove you're something. That's a whole different thing, and that's sort of the world that a lot of people live in. That's unfortunate, is they just kind of assume you don't really, well, whatever, and then you have to talk your way into being valuable, and that sucks.
Yeah,
that sucks.
It
So
does.
that's the one thing that I'll give LA that I like, even though at the core it's still kind of fake. But at least they give you an in to make your case.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, with that being said, like that's there's nothing conditioning. Like when we talk about networking, a lot of times it's really at the core of it. It's really about conditioning too and rigor. You have to do it a lot. You have to do it a lot and do it sort of and have some deliberate guidance on how to do it better. Right, talking to refining it. There has to be that nugget in there to kind of keep trying it, but trying a different way. Doing it your way, but it's still professional. But there's still that rigor aspect of it where you do it enough to where it's like rejection in it's like being rejected from girls. Right, back in the day when I was coming up in the 90s. We would go to the mall, try to get phone numbers from girls. Hey, how you doing?
Yeah,
Hey,
back in the day.
Hey, can I get your phone number? Maybe we can go out sometime. Da da da. And you have to kind of go through that process of multiple no's, because I got a lot of no's. But you go through that. You exercise that muscle of rejection and go and kind of help to overcome that fear a little bit. You still get a little bit nervous, right? But it's not as daunting, because you've gone through the rigor of that. Networking's the same way. You kind of go through the rigor of the rejection, and over time, you get better in some things. And as you get better, you learn how to be flexible and be creative in your approach. If you're not too worried about being rejected, then you can throw in a joke or two. You can throw in some satire here and there. You know what I mean? You're a lot more freer without that fear as much. We all get a little nervous, but it frees you up a little bit, and so like I said, there's no better training than in my experience, like going to Burbank and going to a pitch fest. It's all day. It starts at 8. At least that's how they used to do it. I haven't been to one in a while, but this one in particular started at 8 and it doesn't end until 5 or 6, and it's just endless pitching all day long. They all have different structures in terms of how how often you get to go, but it's pretty frequent. You probably get 3 to 5 pitches in the hour, and you have to sell your story. You have to say why it's important. You have to understand, who actors do you want to play in it? Like knowing the market. Why do you think it's going to sell? Those kind of things, right? And it's like constantly knowing yourself, knowing your story, knowing how it fits into the larger industry, and doing it over and over. And not only that, every look you get is almost different from, when you're standing across from the execs and the reps. They're looking at you with this poker face. Some of them are more responsive than others, but some of them are kind of deadpanning. You're like, is anything I'm saying even remotely interesting?
Yeah.
And that's all day of that, right? There's no greater rigor. And I'll be honest with you, I did that. I must have done that back in 2011 when I did that. I did like 3 of them: Ink Tip, Hollywood Pitch Fest, and I think there was a All American or something like that. Those were like the 3 big ones at the time. And man, After that, though, I was already good. You can tell I'm already a good talker. I can go, right? But after that, though, it had unlodged something in me at that point where if whatever I'm encountering, if it didn't match that, I had it covered. You know what I mean? And sometimes you got to kind of get pushed to that limit a little bit to know what you can compare it to. Like, this ain't that, so I got this. This is nothing, right? It's not asking me to pitch 5 times on the hour for 8 hours. So I got this covered.
Yeah.
And it's great training, you know, and I think that there's some, you know, in anything, there is that aspect of intense rigor that increases your threshold on what you're able to withstand. You know what I mean? And that's a lot to ask of anybody, but it doesn't mean that it's not accurate to some extent. You know, there needs to be some level of intensity for you to be able to withstand some of that heat.
I'm sure it's a transformational experience.
Oh, absolutely, man.
And you talking about it makes me want to do it just to do it, even though I don't think my ideas would get anywhere. But just to do it, that would be good for students in Eastern to do.
Well, you think it's so you never know. I mean, so my story is a dark fantasy, right? Mm-hmm. Mine's is you blend together. If you can think, I'm trying to think in my head how I can best compare this. Take Harry Potter, but for adults. So it's like an adult audience. But take Harry Potter meets The Raid. Mm-hmm. So you're bringing in high octane martial arts with a dark fantasy twist. That's my story. It's kind of like, you know, demon hunters versus demons, right? And you're throwing in some lore, this whole world building, and the rules that are set in this world, right? And then here you have magic and kung fu combined, you know, and most of those do well. If you do them right, they typically do well. You know, if the story fits, and I think that's part of the thing too. Is it's really just a matter of how well you tell your story, and the science of it all. It all comes back to character development, right? It's like, who's the character? You know, I have my gripes about the Hollywood structure. It's a very old system that for them it works because there's an algorithm. You know, there's an algorithm associated with it, and the audience kind of knows, kind of already feels the cadence a little bit, you know. But I have my gripes about it because it kind of, anyway, we'll get to that in a second. But there's this, you know, there's that structure of character development that you have to kind of go through. Who's the character? What do they want? Right? What do they do? Like, what challenge are they going through at that particular time? You know, I'll give you an easy one. Like, you got Peter Parker, right? Mm-hmm. Before he turns into Spider-Man, he's just kind of this nerdy guy who no one really pays attention to. He really wants to get with Mary Jane. Mm-hmm. He has a huge crush on Mary Jane, right? But here he is, just Peter Parker. No one pays attention to him, right? And it isn't, you know, Superman's kind of a similar story, you know. But it's like, but in the instance, it's like they had to invoke something. The radioactive spider comes down, changes him. He goes through this transformational change, but really, you know, the Spider-Man thing is just sort of that flashy, outward thing that kind of thrusts the story forward and gives us something spectacular to look at, flying through the sky, through buildings and all that kind of stuff, right? So that's kind of the main thing. But when you strip all that away, you strip out the web slinging, and you strip out all the swinging around. At the core, it's really about a nerdy kid who wants to get with his dream girl. Mm-hmm. When you think about it. And so a lot of times that's kind of the story. It's like, when you think about movies, you gotta, when they talk about character development, you have to take away, when you take away the flashy thing, a part of it. When you take Godzilla away, if you're watching the Godzilla movie, take Godzilla out the picture. Now what's the story about? And that's your story oftentimes. It just so happens that the bigger monstrosity is sort of the catch. But we all can, anybody who's fans of Godzilla movies knows that Godzilla is really just a symbol anyway. Mm-hmm. You know, we just need something visual to look at. Yeah. So he's a symbol of essentially, you know, man's irresponsibility with waste and, you know, toxic, you know, the way we treat the environment, mm-hmm. you know, and that's kind of, he's just sort of like the result of man's negligence in our environmental society, right? And that's kind of so when you take the monster away, that's sort of what you're sort of getting at is, wow, look how much we've messed up this environment, right?
So who's your monster?
Right. Well, and it's really yourself at the end.
Okay.
Well, in that particular case, it's the attitude of humanity in general, right? When you
No, I mean like in your story.
Oh.
Who's your monster?
So the story of mine is called Reclamation, and it's an action, Stark horror. And what we have is our character, our main antagonists in this are basically a demon horde, that's under the rulage of a high-ranking demon by the name of Baal. Okay. For those who know, that Baal is an actual demon in the demon hierarchy, whatever. Yep. So I just kind of adopted that. Okay. And so I had some liberties with the lore a little bit, as we should. And so Baal is kind of he was in this particular story. He was he began as sort of a low-ranking demon, almost like a mercenary, if you will, where he does odd jobs here and there. He has his clan of people that follow him wherever he goes, but he's kind of fed up with having to be the cleanup. Some of the higher gods would summon. He's under the tutelage of Mammon, and whenever Mammon wanted something, he would send him out to go collect it for him. And so he just kind of got fed up with being that person. And so here we are with the story of a high-ranking demon who wants his own sovereignty. And he makes a deal with his superior to gain it. Doesn't realize that you really can't make deals with Mammon, right? We name money after Mammon. That makes sense. So if you could think about your most crony capitalist, and you're under the rule of a crony capitalist, and you no longer want to be a participant in the capitalist system, and you want to make a deal with this crony individual about how to do that. I mean, naturally, and they're hellish on top of that. They have no remorse for humanity. To them, they're just products, right? Things to be, they're ledgers on pages that are meant to feed my fortune, right? How do you think that conversation is going to go? Right? If you are coming to someone like that and saying, hey, I want my own sovereignty. I want to do my own thing, me and my clansmen. And, it's not going to go well.
No.
Right? And if they do play ball, like, okay, sure, we might be able to make a deal on this. That's probably going to be the most. Are we allowed to use profanity on this?
Yeah.
It's probably going to be the most shit deal you've ever seen in your life.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Which is indeed happens in this story. So here we have Baal making a shit deal with Mammon. And once he realizes it, he decides that he wants to form a coup to overthrow Mammon. And so in order to do that, he decides that he wants to basically go over into the human world and stockpile souls in order to resurrect a bigger being to help him do that.
Okay, that's cool. I like that.
So he wants to resurrect Leviathan.
That kind of like the Power Rangers thing.
Kind of the Power Rangers thing.
Combine a bunch of souls.
Yeah. So we're kind of diving into this whole world of soul collection and using it for nefarious purposes, all with the ultimate goal of overthrowing a more superior demon. And that's just on the antagonist side. That's the antagonist's desire to be free from a tyrannical master, right? And that's what's driving our villain. And then we have on the protagonist side, our main character, we have an accountant. He's a very basic guy named, his name is Raymond. And so, here he is, living a normal life, which has much mystery to it, which he finds out later. But for right now, he's in his 30s and he's an accountant and he wants to rise up above the ranks and be, upstanding. And, and I would say this too, get out of the shadow of his father, who is a popular televangelist. You ever seen 700 Club, church people, they can get Joel Osteen or somebody. They can pack quite a crowd. You could imagine with their, I'm not sure, I don't know much about Joel Osteen's family, but I could imagine there might be a lot of pressure for his children to want to get out of that shadow. Are you going to take your father's place? Those expectations that they likely didn't ask for.
Yeah. Are you even that religious?
Right, you know.
Because of your dad.
Right. You must be. Are you going to be? You know, they all, in the celebrity kids and popular people's kids, they all kind of go through that. You know, Michael Jordan's kids. You know, are you going to be better than your dad? You know, those kind of things. Like, dude, I just want to have a normal life. But anyway, so that's so that's part of the driving. That's part of the thing is his desire to kind of be his own person and get out of the shadow of his own father. But unfortunately, when he finds out that his father's mysteriously killed, and he is now officially there's now officially a manhunt on him from this oncoming demon clan, he realizes that his father was much more connected than he thought. So it kind of has a Brothers Grimm type of feel to it, or Supernatural. We've seen that TV series where where the father was actually connected, was actually a demon hunter. In his second life, you know, so a televangelist by day, demon hunter by night, and when he's ultimately killed, it kind of puts his son in the middle of this demon conflict that's taking place in present time, yeah, and so that's kind of the crux of what the story's about. But again, take away the monster, right, and this story is really about, you know, a resentful son who can't connect with his father. His father's too busy, you know, he's too focused on his professional life, too into himself, whatever the case may be. Either way, there's not a connection there. And as a result of that, this son has grown. He's in his 30s now. He's resentful of the fact that he never could connect with them, you know. And you know, that's one of the ways that I pitch it now. I didn't know to pitch this back in 2011, but that's sort of the selling point that I do now is, you know, what do we know about our parents? You know, that's kind of the hook at the beginning of the conversation. You're like, you know, what were they like before we were born? You know, what were their passions before all the financial and time constraints? You know what I mean? And then I'll spin it in and say, well, and you know, perhaps the bigger question is, how do you know if your parents are who they truly say they are? You know, and that's kind of the hook where I go into the rest of the story. And so that's me essentially beginning. I'm leading with that. You know, I'm not even addressing the monster yet. That's me kind of talking about the desire and the tribulations of the character, of the main character, you know. And so that's the feedback that I've gotten has been very positive with that approach, because that's really what it's about. It's about, you know, a son overcoming the loss of his father, who he never knew, but now is told he needs to fill his footsteps or not and risk death. You know, he's kind of forced into this world. Like, you know, they're looking, the demons are looking for him because of who he's connected to, and he has absolutely no reason. He doesn't understand why.
And the sins of the father.
Yeah. And so it's really a sort of a journey in how he comes to this self-discovery, who he meets in that process, and how he essentially has to decide if he will do that, if he will take up the mantle of his father, and if he does, for what reasons. And so, yeah. So anyway, that's what I'm trying to fish out, and it's doing well. I mean, so far it's doing good. I've talked to Paramount Pictures about it, and a particular person, he really likes the story. There are some adjustments that I need to make around, the antagonist being a little bit more clear in some certain areas in terms, because you could pitch the story all you want. The script has to match the intensity of the pitch, right? You still have to write a good story.
Yeah.
And so there's always going to be suggestions like about that, like Sinners. Like, for instance, Sinners just got screenplay. They got an Oscar for best screenplay just recently. But when you run it through the mill, there's all kind of stuff in there, right? That didn't quite flush out, right? And so they're not perfect. It's enough to win an award, but again, there's always going to be suggestions, and so that's part of the process of creative writing, is writing it the way you want to write it, but it has to be clear and it has to make sense within the structure. And it also, here's the other part. This goes back to this is where the who you know, what you know thing, who you know makes a difference. And it's, it has to be the rep that you're selling it to or you're pitching it to, they're a gatekeeper in a sense. So if they have suggestions, you're almost kind of being voluntold in a certain way, you know, like, so if they're saying this isn't quite fit right with them, you know, then maybe you make a second draft and give them what they want, where you have your master draft on the back burner somewhere where you might do a bait and switch later. You know what I mean? But that's, you know, so that's essentially what's happening a lot, you know, for me in this case, is that I have suggestions. They like it, but they have suggestions. And so I'm kind of adhering to those suggestions and hoping that it will get the legs it deserves, honestly. And so, but that's just one. You know, I have another investment company that's interested in as well. So they had some good suggestions also, and so I'm working on that, and then I hope to reach out to them a little bit after Easter. So we'll see. Nice. That's just one story. I got a few others, but that's my passion project. Yeah. So
well, it's cool because you're leaving your comfort zone.
Yeah.
And you have to blossom where you're planted. You have to go and create this idea and then pitch it, which is not easy.
Nope.
None of this is easy, and this is why I think you're drawn to it, is because it is challenging.
It goes back to what we talked about at the beginning: small victories.
Mm-hmm.
Took a lot to get here, you know, and a lot of development and a lot of learning and refinement, and that's not nothing, even though the end goal, we're still working on it, right? Yeah. But not forgetting what it took to get here. And that's what's important, you know. And as I kind of, you know, as I think introspectively about the journey, you know, I'm happy. I mean, I wouldn't say I'm satisfied, but I'm happy having got the chance to do what I've been able to do so far, even if it hasn't gotten the legs yet. So, but that's the fire that keeps me going. It's the thought that I've come this far. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So might as well try to finish it. So, yeah.
So do you have voices that you do?
I don't, but I hire out.
Oh, cool.
I think I did a demon voice here and there to try to save time because I didn't want to hire someone. But for the most part, I hire professionals to do the voiceover work for me. Yeah. And so, yeah, I didn't even explain that part. I mean, originally it's meant to be it was originally written to be a live action. But a lot of the movies back in 2010, 2011, 12, they're still very expensive now. But they were even more expensive back then because... And this is where AI comes in again. But back then, they had to sort of create the programs to be able to satisfy the technology needs of those movies. I mean, the movie that came to mind for me was Transformers. Mm. They kept having to put Transformers on the back burner because they didn't have the technology to give it the look that it needed. You know, the parts moving and them morphing from a truck to a humanoid robot. Like they just didn't have it back then. They had to kind of wait for it all to kind of catch up with the visual demands needed. And so the year that it came out, the first one, it had already been written 8 years before, and they just had that's how long they spent trying to develop it, right? And so this is, you know, now, so with that in mind, super expensive. Right, 100 million plus just to do those kind of things, and now because of them going through that rigor of those programs, and they've been able to save. You know, they save a lot of that stuff. So even when they you know, the movements and the codes that they use to do the movements. There's somebody. I think there was someone on YouTube that they have a channel that does that, where they compare movements from one animation to the other, and it's the exact same movement. So like the person literally.
Oh yeah, I've seen that. Yeah, like Disney used to do that.
Yeah,
with, it saves them. Yeah, a lot.
Cuts and pastes. You know, they just illustrate around it, but it's the same coding movement. You know, so they have a lot of that stuff stored away now because of the rigor of having to do all that stuff. So that brought the price down a little bit more because it made the job easier. And now with AI, it just speeds it up even faster now because the AI programs can just speed the coding up, and then they can even add on, you know, evolve it and do some of the code work for you. You know what I mean? And so it takes out the mundane task of having to re-illustrate and recode the movements that are in the visual world, right? And so that's where, you know, for those who might be on the fence about AI, that's one of the instances where it's good because it helps to cut down on the mundane task, which brings the price down for the visual effects fees. And so now what was once 80 million to do is now closer to 60 or 50. Still a lot of money, but it makes my argument that much easier to make, because again, back in 2011 when I pitched this, they loved it, but they didn't want anything to do with it, because to them that was $100 million to $120 million movie franchise. They loved it, but here's this unknown guy. I didn't know anybody in the industry. This unknown guy coming to me with no credentials to his name. He hasn't written anything, no graphic novel. And they're also this is also the beginning of algorithms too. So with no following, you didn't have a book that made X amount of sales. You're just here.
Yeah.
And you're coming to me with $100 million project. No way, that's not happening.
Yeah.
Do something smaller to build your rep up, and then maybe further down the line we can work with you. And so that's what I did. I've been working on other projects, but it's still been there, and I'm, and when I get the chance to pitch it, I do. And so that's kind of where things are now. It's highly, which now we're actually more than knee deep. Well, Hollywood's drowning at this point. Mm-hmm. It was knee deep then. It's past the neck at this point. It's up to the mouth, because they've effectively priced themselves out of the market. Unfortunately, they're competing with international markets now that are using AI. But even if you take AI out of even if you go back 6 years and you take AI out of the picture, you still had illustrators that were just as good, if not better, that were living in a climate that had a lower cost of living, so the price can come down to do a lot of the same work.
I heard that Disney's going back to all hand-drawn illustrations.
We'll see.
Yeah.
I mean, that'll help people stay employed, but we'll see.
Mm-hmm.
And see, the thing about it, and it all comes back to the money, right? Is the money going to reflect that move? And if it's going to cost them more to do, then they probably won't last long. But even still, even in that, so my story is, so let me kind of move forward a little bit. So because my story is super expensive, still is, for a live action, I've opted to go a cheaper route and make it a 2D animation. So more.
That's fun.
Yeah,
2D animation's great.
Absolutely, man. I'm all hands on deck on that now. Just the thought of it, because after we've seen like Castlevania on Netflix, it's hard to imagine that that's 2D. Right, for people who don't know, really, it's just so, a lot of the 2D animation is just so good now. It looks like 3D, and some of it might be a blend of the two, but even still, it looks so good and it's so captivating. Most of the shows we like are 2D. We just don't really, some of us don't even really know it, and so I'm cool with it. Yeah, and it's cheaper, and I'm outsourcing it, which a lot of places are doing it now. So I'm hoping, I was working with a company out in the UK. Brazen Animation. And so, and they have a particular business model where they are sort of working with other animation studios, and they all sort of chip in to do a project. That's how they keep the price down, And so again, in terms of forward thinking, that's where it's going to go. A lot of the LA companies are already outsourcing anyway. They'll outsource it to someone in Malaysia to do some of the basic groundwork, and then they'll bring it back to another company that does some of the other kinds of So they're already doing it. They do have to keep a certain percentage of the work in LA to get to satisfy certain union requirements, and that's part of what's keeping them, kind of stuck in LA, for that matter. A lot of the union agreements. Well, people like myself who are up and coming, I don't have those such agreements. I can outsource if I want to. And once it's a finished product, sell it to Netflix or somebody. But again, same quality, if not better, but for 90% of the cost. Like my project. So in LA, if I wanted to do my project working with an LA studio, it would probably cost me, for a 2D animation, it probably would cost me upward to 10 to 15 million, if not more.
Wow.
probably somewhere in there. You know, that's just the LA studio because we're fighting against the market, right? You know, that market value. Whereas if I can go overseas and work with someone in Malaysia, Costa Rica, or Brazil, they got great artists in Brazil. Cut it in half, or even cheaper, 5 million. You know, and it's like when you explain that to someone in LA, that yeah, I can get this 2D animation done at quality, at Castlevania quality, right, for 5 million. They're like, really? No, the quality's gonna stink. I'm like, no, it's not. That's what you're up against. You're up against what's the name of that studio? The Line. There's a company called The Line that's in London, and they do killer work. They're doing a lot of the animations that we're watching right now. You know, a lot of it is being sort of, the groundwork is being done by this company, and they're doing it for a fraction of the price. They just outsource it to them. They do all the heavy lifting and they bring it back. And so yeah, man, it's like no. You have some heavy competition globally, and you're gonna have to figure out what you're gonna do about your price margins, because more and more people are starting especially a lot of your indie films are just gonna start going places. You know, there are still some places statewide that, you know, have good tax incentives. Kentucky, you know, they have a great. I was funny when I went to AFM back in November. You know, they have a whole room dedicated to, you know, come to our city and film your next project, and here are the benefits you can get, your tax incentives and all that kind of stuff. And so Kentucky was there, and they were just kind of showing, you know, you think Kentucky, you're thinking green, farmland, all that kind of stuff, man. And they got some great developments they've been doing over the course of a decade, man. And great 30% tax incentive somewhere in there, which is decent in comparison to what everyone else is doing. You know, so yeah, so that's some of the places like that. It's kind of your saving grace. Go to Kentucky, film your project there, or but even with that, going overseas and getting another tax incentive, getting it for a fraction of the. Canada used to kill for a while. You know, their government got involved, and they were providing upwards to 50 to 60% tax incentive in various subsidies. And, you know, they do that, you know, for tourism, right? Most of your Deadpool movies were done in Canada, and they got huge incentives. Oh. Yeah. And so it's like, yeah, man. And like LA was getting killed. They were so mad about that. They're like, yeah, you go to Canada and film it where the government assists you with your films. And I'm like, why not? You know, they want people to visit Canada, you know, and spend their money up there. And so they use movies as a way to build up tourism. Why not? You know, that's less of a knock on them and more of a knock on LA. Y'all got to figure out how you're going to get your price margins together. That'll be the biggest problem. And so if anybody wants to know why movies are so expensive and why the cost to go to the theater is so damn high, it all trickles down to that problem right there, which is they've just priced themselves. They've got to recoup somehow. And when Moana 2, which was a cute movie, lovely, when it cost $250 some odd million to make, and that's before P&A, you can add on another $100 million for P&A. Y'all, if you look it up, you know, look it up when you get a chance. It's a lot of money for a 3D. That's 3D animation.
Yeah, you'd be like, it's cheaper to hire hand-drawn animators.
Right? Yeah. So, you know, we'll see. I like the old animation. I like the old cell animations better anyway. It was much more dreamy and all that stuff. I loved it more. But we'll see what they're, you know, and it all really just sort of comes back to competition. They can try anything, but how will it pan out with the audience? You know what I mean? And but then this is because of all of this, all that I've laid out in terms of the financials and the market value and competing with global markets and all that stuff. Like, I'll give you another example. So, Neza 2, it's an animation that was based out of China. A Chinese animation company made that, and it was based off the god Neza, right? They did this is a sequel. The first one they did it did all right, you know, 600 million. I think it made a little bit more once it was done, but the sequel that came out earlier this year basically now is the highest grossing animation of all time. beat out Zootopia, beat out Toy Story, all of them. Number one, it almost doubled the amount of revenue.
That's really good if it beat out Zootopia.
$2.3 billion.
That's a lot.
Yep. And here's the kicker.
And there's no movie theater.
Well, here's the thing. Here's the catch. They were already at 2.1 or somewhere in there billion dollars before even leaving China. They hadn't even explored the larger global markets yet, and they had already beat out the box office just in China. Mm-hmm. And so by the time it got over here, obviously it didn't make much of it. Maybe there's some other competitive forces at nature. A24, A24 is a cool company. They, I hope to work with them someday. But they stepped in and they handled the distribution of Neza into the States. And so they were trying, do their P&A to get the word out. Their P&A could have been better. Maybe because they didn't really know how well it was going to do, but it didn't collect as much revenue from the States, and maybe that might be lack of marketing. Maybe it might have been other kind of competitive forces at work. Who knows? But fact of the matter is, Neza 2 beat them and never even left China. So that just goes, and the cost to make it, 60, 70 million to make it versus Moana 2, 240 million.
Yeah.
See what I mean? Like that's what we're up against. And so because of that, it makes it harder for people like myself to bring new innovative ideas, because now what they're doing is most of your major studios anyway, they leave a little pocket open, but for the most part, they're primarily focusing on IP right now. Anything that has intellectual property. So that's the Spider-Mans, that's the Ninja Turtles, anything that already has a pre-existing audience. That's where they're putting most of their bank, And it's unfortunate because here you are someone like myself who's coming in with a newer, fresher idea. Because there's only a few ways you can make a movie. My story is pretty much. If you've seen Brothers Grimm, if you've seen any kind of other like Underworld or something like that, they're all kind of in the same ilk. They just have different recipes on how to tell the story, but it's kind of the same type of thing, right? But anybody who's sort of in that world, like myself, who's trying to get it in and they have new IP, it's not. They just kind of have a harder time, And that's sort of what I'm up against right now is getting people to take a risk on this. And so and so we're now getting into this world where we're going to see Spider-Man 15, X-Men, hold on, Spider-Man. They got the new Spider-Man coming out. They just released it. Is it called Far From Home? I think that's called something from home. There are just like a few.
There are so many. I got lost in the whole Panderverse thing.
Yeah,
they were like doing all the crazy shit with the Spider-Man. I just kind of gave up there.
It's a money grab. Those things,
Yeah.
It's like I think about the Avengers Endgame, right? They couldn't leave well enough. They didn't want the. That's a whole other. So this is a other crafty thing. I don't want to get too far off this point, but like the nature of creative storytelling is very difficult now because it's not really difficult, but it's so predictable. That's what I wanted to say.
Very predictable.
And part of the reason why, I said I was going to go back to addressing this structure situation. The writing structure that they tell you to adhere to. That your reps sort of make you follow. And there's a whole algorithm that they make, their whole structure that they make. And this is stuff that's been developed, old guys back in the 1920s, that they wanted to have some sort of, some standard of how movies are going to be circumvented. Because people were writing all kind of stuff and all kind of like, characters get developed, later in the movie. And they're like, wait. Well, it just kind of it was just a little bit more chaotic. I wouldn't even say chaotic. It was just a much more free-for-all in terms of the way stories were told. And so all these old men got together, all these bankers and stuff that got together, whatever. They had a vested interest in Hollywood, got together and was like, okay, well, we're going to decide. We got to come up with some structure. We can't just be getting any old thing coming our way with scripts and all that kind of stuff. We need to have a standard that people are going to write to that keeps everything consistent, and that's how we're going to do it. And if they can't follow this structure, we're just going to weed them out. And that system's been with us for the longest. It's still that way. Character has to be, the world of the character has to be developed by page 10. For those who don't know, every minute on page is, every page on your screenplay is a minute screen time. So that's where you get the 120 pages as a 2-hour movie.
That's a good, interesting ratio.
Yeah, that's how they do it. And they want you to stay under 120
That's
minutes.
a lot of
120
pages.
hours. Yeah, they want you to stay under 120 minutes. Now keep in mind, Sinners won Best Screenplay for the Oscar this year. 154 pages. Now, just think about that. A lot of your major movies that we all love and remember, and they resonate in our minds. There Will Be Blood. What was the other one? The Coen Brothers. No Country for Old Men. Go look at those movies and look at the page length. I bet you they're over 120, and I bet you that a lot of times, the structure of it is very different than the traditional structure that they tell you to have. And so again, yes, right to the structure. So, right to the structure to get in and maybe do your own thing once you're in. But at the same time, it's like, a lot of those writers, they kind of have a lot more wherewithal because they have the reputation to kind of go do their own thing creatively. But getting into the business and getting recognized, there's very much sort of that very much that bottleneck of, you need to write to this structure for us to even look at it, and it keeps getting sent back. And so that's just, a lot of your awards that you see, a lot of your Academy Awards and Oscars for screenplays, go look at the page length, go look at the structure. I can almost guarantee you that the vast majority of them, they don't follow the page length like you would think. Like the antagonist might show up on page 50 instead of page 30. Like the world of the protagonist might be done in 5 pages, or you might not see a full functioning of it till page 20. So so the structure is different for the masters, if you will, and it's the rest of us that kind of have to stick to that. But again, that's stuff that they got to kind of sort through too. Like that's part of why I like George Lucas so much, is because a lot of people kind of got on his case a little bit for Star Wars, because there were all these actors that and we're talking about like the Phantom Menace and all that kind of stuff, the later ones, they had all these actors came to him to play certain roles. Like I think like Gary Oldman wanted to play Obi-Wan Kenobi, something like that, or one of them. But they came to him with all these notes of how they wanted the character to look, So these are thespian actors coming in with their own input on how they want certain things to be. And George Lucas was like, "No, man, no. I'm doing my own thing. I care more about telling the story. I don't care that you're some thespian. I want you to be able to tell the story of Obi-Wan or Luke or whoever." You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And to some degree, I think he was on the right track. In another place, in other instances, maybe we probably would have been better served by having a Gary Oldman in there, because Gary Oldman's great. So who knows how that would have turned out? But again, there's always that other force that is fighting for other creative ways of telling a story and being able to break the structure. You know what I mean? And the larger industry kind of not really being with it, because they're sort of adhered. And again, old white men in the 1920s, same old white men now, unfortunately. And even if there are reps and execs that agree with what I'm saying about mixing up the structure a little bit and being a little bit more creative with the storytelling in terms of how things come about, they still have a boss to answer to. And that's really what's running the show, unfortunately. And that's also what we're seeing. They'll come to them and say, "Yeah, so we got The Rock. We got The Rock, and we got who else is somebody? Well, we got Kevin Hart. I won't pick on Kevin Hart, but we got The Rock, and then we got Jason. Oh, I got Jason Statham. Oh, and we got Vin Diesel too. Somebody else. Okay, The Rock and Zendaya are going to be father and daughter in this new action suspense detective movie, whatever." And they're gonna, and all they don't even care. Like most of them just be like, "The Rock and Zendaya, ooh, they're popular. Yeah, let's do it." They don't even care about the rest of it. Let's see, Rock, Zendaya, poster, already popular. Boom, let's go, right? And so we'll leave it to y'all to figure it out. I'm sure it's gonna be great. I trust y'all. That's what they do. They look at the algorithm and they look at the popularity, how it might feel on the poster, and then run with it. And that's kind of what they're up against too. Is they're up against older men who've been in the business with lots of money and lots of pull, and they're connected with all the same people, and they're all making judgment calls on what the industry is going to look like. You know what I mean? And you would have thought K-pop Demon Hunter would have like opened their eyes a little bit to the animation world. Unfortunately, we might have to wait for the sequel to see what that does, which they've announced that they're going to do a sequel to K-pop Demon Hunter, which, Sony passed on it. You know what I mean? Right?
Interesting.
They passed on it and ended up making a killing. Right? And they got best animation this year. Got an Oscar for best animation, right?
It did.
And so it just goes to show you that there's an insurgence happening from outside the U.S. and they're a force to be reckoned with because of price and quality. And the West doesn't have an answer for it yet. And the cost is too high. And families who want to go to the movies are having to make life decisions to go see a movie now.
Yeah, right? It's stupid expensive.
I want to go see a movie. I'm like, even with gift cards,
$30 a ticket? No thanks.
Right?
Whatever it is.
Right, and that's with gift cards. You still dropping 50. So and popcorn, and I'm just so like people have if you got more than one kid, that's crazy. So it's like. So there's that question, they got all over. I don't even know how to say his name. Timothy Chalamet, I think that's how you say his name. Chalamet. He was in Dune. He's the popular guy, great actor. They got on him recently about his what he was saying about ballet and stuff about people not being interested. You don't want to. He was kind of making a comparison to the movie industry and how he doesn't want it to be in a place where we're begging people to go to the theater to watch something that they don't really care about anymore. And he compared it to ballet. And because he did that, it created all sorts of flack because it felt like he was beaten down on other art forms. So he's in some hot water right now for making a comparison he shouldn't have made, because I like ballet. I've never been to one, but I want to go someday. But again, I see what he meant. A lot of money. And this was the same prediction that George Lucas and James Cameron made 10 years ago. They were talking about the future of Hollywood, which is it's going to be too expensive to go to a theater. They're going to treat movie going a lot like going to an opera, where you pay $200 to go and you're going to get a fuller experience. But it's going to be few and far between. It's like most people are going to be watching it at home because that's what they can afford. And if you want to go see it in a much more theatrical sense, it's going to cost you $200. They made that prediction. That's sort of their forecast of where things were going, and they said that in an article 10 years ago, maybe longer. And so it's going to be interesting to see what happens, But in the meantime, there's that question of like, there's another question that came up that was interesting. I don't know if this was an article. I think this was an article. I forget who wrote it, but there was a question around. When we were coming up, we had icons. Mm-hmm. We had movie icons. And when you think about the 80s and 90s, there were some things you could point to, right? Movies that kind of shaped our reality and our childhood in a way. You can think Friday the 13th and the Jason mask. You can think Rambo and the red bandana. He would tighten it up with his muscle-bound back. Arnold Schwarzenegger. Michael Jordan with the tongue out, right? Like Terminator, like all these things that, and it's interesting because it's like, these were things we saw. And this is how they created their own archetypes, which is interesting because it's like when you saw Jordan, when Jordan created his image, after that, you saw, like you knew who Jordan was, even if it wasn't Jordan, it was someone trying to emulate Jordan. If he was bald and he had his tongue out, you're like, oh yeah, he's doing the Michael Jordan thing. Or if he's muscle bound and he had an accent, even if it was a cartoon, you knew that they're doing the Arnold Schwarzenegger thing, right? And it's like they created their own archetypes. And even with Bruce Lee, for instance, it's like Anytime you see a shirtless Chinese guy who's making wata, making any kind of noise whatsoever when they attack, we already know.
Oh, that he brought a whole culture.
Right.
To,
That's exactly my point. Like, so, like, we point, like, even now when we watch certain movies, we already can kind of see whose coattails they kind of following, right? Even when you think about Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, like, you can think Hulk Hogan.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You know, so this is like, even people before that, right? So there's like there's a whole like pathway. And so the question though is, like, what's going to be the icons of this generation? Was the question. Generation Z and Alphas, right? And what is it going to be comprised of? Interesting question, right? Like, who is their Friday the 13th?
I know one of them is Mr. Beast.
Influencers.
Yeah.
That's the thing. So their generation is going to be primarily, you know, that's their icons.
Yeah,
the influencers.
that's all they give a shit about. They could care less about meeting Tom Cruise.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, they could care less about meeting Tom Cruise.
And you touch on it, and you touch on an excellent point, because that also affects movies, right? Mm-hmm. Because in our day, when we saw Arnold on the cover, we said, "Oh shit!
Yeah.
I don't care what he's going to be, kindergarten cop. I'm going to see it, right? It's going to be interesting, right?" Now, you put Brad Pitt on the cover, the newer generation doesn't give a shit.
No.
Yeah, you know. Now, if Mr. Beast is on it, or for instance, all right, I'll give you another example. My son, he loves. I was talking about it this morning. I was like, well, you know, what are you into? You know, like what kind of stuff? I already kind of know, but I just wanted to get him talking because we're having a conversation. And he's like Five Nights at Freddy. You know, this is again YouTube stuff, right? And they released a movie earlier last year, 25, right? The sequel, Five Nights at Freddy Part 2. The first one, like, very basic movie. They follow the algorithm because they don't really need to really be sophisticated, because it's kids. They just want to see their characters and be done with it. The first Five Nights at Freddy came out a couple years prior. $230 million for that thing. Mm-hmm. Cost $60 million to make. Somewhere between 60 and 70. Mm-hmm. Killing. I mean, I'm sure they could have got off cheaper, but still, paid 60 to 70, got back 240 million. Nice work. Again, that pushed the impetus to do the second one. It's very similar. 60 million, 70 million, 240 million. Killing. You can look all this up. I might be off a little bit with my numbers, but it's still that same margin. It took 60 to 70 million to make, came back with 200. And like, so kids ate it up. And when you watch the movie, it's, you know, it's whatever, you know, it's not really all that, you know, but I'm an adult, right? Me watching it with adult eyes, I'm not really that impressed. My son liked it. It was more fan service to him. He just wanted to see what the characters did, you know, but even still, it made a killing. And so that's where they're going is, you know, they're gonna do Five Nights at Freddy again. I think they already announced it. They're gonna do. When I was in LA, they announced that they're gonna do for any people who play like Roblox and stuff like that. How they have all those mini games in there. Yeah. So there's one that's popular in there that's called 99 Nights in the Forest.
Okay.
Yeah, it's based off this true story where these kids, or there was a plane that got downed in the Amazon or something like that. And there were a few survivors, like kids that had survived, like a 13-year-old and some other kids that were like in the single digits, 6 and 7 or something like that. And basically they had survived. It wasn't 99 nights though. They had survived like, I think 30 days or something like that in the forest before being rescued. And so they created this whole Roblox game. I don't know if there might be other stuff. My son wouldn't know all the details, but it's very popular on Roblox. And I even play it. It's fun. And they're going to do a movie on that.
Yeah. So that begs the question, what's cheaper to make? The kids game or the movie?
See?
So if you started with the kids game first.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be interesting.
And what kind of audience do you get? And is it worth it doing a Demon Hunter movie from a no-name person?
Demon Hunter game.
Huh? Yeah, could be that too.
Yeah, on Roblox.
I know, right? Hey, you might be onto something there, right? You might be onto something. Just do a Demon Hunter game, come up with some rules, and if it gets popular, I think we might be onto something
think
there.
you
See, I
are.
might have to tinker on that. See,
Yeah,
boom.
that's a good one. Well,
But that's again, that's the conversations they are having though. Is can you attach it to something? And that was a lot of feedback that I got. Graphic novel, comic book, motion
think
comics,
of all the
whatever.
games that were first games, like
Yeah.
Red Dead Redemption.
Yeah.
That before they became movies, like what's that one with the Umbrella Corporation with all the zombies?
Oh yeah, Resident Evil.
Resident
Yeah.
Evil. Yeah.
I'm playing that right now. I'm trying to finish up on it. I had to put it. I had to put it.
Scary one.
I had to put it aside so I can finish my get my writing finished for this conversation. But yeah, man, I'm playing that one right now, man. Yeah, they did a really good job. Yeah. So, but yeah, same thing. So that, but it begs the question though. So if we now know that Brad Pitt isn't important to the newer generation, right? And it's IP driven. And we know that the icons of today are influencers, right? And so what is that? They do know Spider-Man, right? They know, although that's why that's the IP part of it is like they know Spider-Man, they know Ninja Turtles, because Ninja Turtles, it's timeless because they keep bringing it back. They're gonna, anyway, but Ninja Turtles, Spider-Man, like all the Marvel stuff, right? So those are pretty much good, right? For as long as we keep going, they're going to keep and they make a reasonable price. They're going to recoup. And so, but it still begs the question though. If they keep doing that and we get a Spider-Man 19 and when they're done with Tom Holland and they want to see, okay, Tom Holland was great Spider-Man. Let's see what it's like with, some younger actor that we don't know yet. Mm-hmm. Fill in blank, right? And people keep going.
A total pussy actor.
Whatever.
Not even one
right.
you'd want to be.
Right, whatever. Yeah, they're going to try something, right? And the same thing, like, what was it, James Gunn for Superman. Henry Cavill had a good run. Well, now let's do James Gunn. And they'll just keep doing that over and over again for as long as they have an audience. But the question you have to ask yourself now is, what's going to be their callback 20 years from now? Like we still have Friday the 13th. So they're basically just like rehashing stuff that was in our era or even before our era. They just keep redoing them. Mm-hmm. But what it also does too is what happens to my story or other stories that could start a whole new franchise that that can be around for another 50 years. You know what I mean? They kind of get put on the back burner for the stuff that's already been around for 100 years.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's kind of the question is they're not making those kinds of investments and what is it and how is that going to have an effect long term? You know what I mean? And that's going to be a very interesting thing. Well, it does for me in the movie making process because I'm trying to get my stuff out there. But that'll be an interesting question in general. How that's going to look in terms of how the rest of the entertainment experience, how that's going to look in the next 30 years. Yeah. So
I think about that often.
Yeah.
I think because I worked for this company called Funflix Outdoor Movies for 5 years, and we just set up inflatable outdoor screens. And
oh yeah.
And I think the resurgence of outdoor movies is coming back.
Sure.
I learned that outdoor movies were killed because the drive-in was killed because of movie rights. Movie rights are so expensive. That it's just impractical to run a efficient drive-in movie theater.
Yeah. 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 I don't know enough about that topic, but I know at the university sometimes we can buy rights to movies and show them and all that.
Do. Yeah, we've done that too.
But they have very specific mandates on how you do it. In terms of game build. Do you sell tickets? Do you do concessions? You can free to do. I think you're free to do concessions, but any money that you make, you have to cut them, and that's all kind of stuff. But yeah. But who knows? Who knows what that's going to look like? We'll see.
Have you started making your own AI music?
It's funny. No, but it's for good reason. It's not because I don't want to. It's honest. Well, I'll say it this way. It is because I don't want to at the moment. Mm-hmm. I'm kind of 1 foot in, 1 foot out. Right? I use AI to help me brainstorm with some of my story building. You know what I mean? And so it's like, what would Ball think? What does Ball think about realizing he was betrayed by Mamone? what's some dialogue he could say? You know what I mean? I'll play with that a little bit. And I'm like, oh, I like that. I'm not going to say it that way, but I like where this is going. You know, it kind of gives you some brainstorming capacity. But I'm still the master behind how I want this to look. But so it's like talking to a very, very knowledgeable friend next door who happens to know a lot of things and very intense in vocabulary that I can bounce ideas off of. So that's how I use it. But in terms of music and some other things, I kind of want to keep it as human centric as possible, right? And for the 2D animation, I'm actually working with some live artists. Matter of fact, they have a German band that's coming to Seattle in April 22nd, I believe. They're called Unprocessed. I found their work on Spotify. I was looking for some. So in my attempt to put together a pitch deck, because that's what they're doing now, pitch decks. You got 25-page pitch decks that you can give to studios to show how you plan to pull off the film if they were to fund it. Basically a business plan. And so in my pitch deck, I have a page that talks about all the different people that I have bought into the project, like soft commitments, if we were to get the funding, right? And so I have a whole section on music artists. And so I have a grunge band. So they're a grunge band based out of Germany, and great music. They have the lead singer, Manuel. He kind of does this finger picking that's kind of like see, people who do guitar, they know more about this stuff than me, but it kind of reminds me of like the Puss in Boots or the Zorro, when they have the guitar gets to going, he does that thing with his little finger pick. I know guitar people are like, it's called this. I don't really know the name for it, but it sounds beautiful how he blends it in with grunge, with his grunge metal. And so I thought that they would be a good, add good music to what we were doing. And so I reached out to him and was like, hey, I'm trying to do this story. It's a 2D animation. If it takes off, I would love for you to provide some tracks, some custom tracks for this. Because for me, this is all the stuff. This is my larger vision with this whole thing, is that I don't want it to just be an animation. I want to get back to the old days where you were just excited for the soundtrack too. Remember those days?
Yeah, that's
where,
what I'm thinking.
Yeah,
like the songs.
Yeah,
because I started making my own AI generated songs.
Right,
and I love it.
Like Daredevil, the Ben Affleck Daredevil was one thing, but it was like you were excited to hear Evanescence. Like Evanescence did the score on that. You're like, oh man, that song is good. Like I want to get back to that where it's like the movie is working on full quadrant. Like the artists get to platform off of it. Like damn, I love that song. Who did that? And then they get a whole audience that gets built off of that. 'Cause I know they're trying to get their version of a foreign market, which is us, introduced to their work. I want to help them with that. So I had a whole list of about 5 or 6 artists that are a little lower on the reception end, but they're great and up and coming, just like myself, And so I wanted to make sure that was something that everyone working on the project were all trying to get exposure. And so we're all sort of one hand wash the other type of thing. And that's A, how we're able to keep it affordable, more affordable than it already is. But then B, we all have a vested interest because we all can use this platform as a way of getting the exposure we want. So yeah, Unprocessed, they're going to be at, I'm doing shady advertising. There's a place, El Cantante in Seattle. They're going to be there April 22nd. I'm gonna get a flight and go down and see them. So,
cool.
Yeah, because they're coming all the way from Germany, man, to be here. So I told them, I'm like, man, I heard you're going to Seattle, man. That's my neck of the woods. So I'm gonna go see him next month. So should be fun.
Good for you.
Yeah. So, but that's the thinking, It's like for those who are trying to like get into the industry, thinking full quadrant like that is particularly if you're a writer. If you're a director, you got other skill sets that you can bring to the table. You can actually, join Spokane Few and get people to help do readings or do act out certain scenes. You have other things at your disposal if you already know how to do certain skill sets. But when you're a writer, you have to kind of do a lot of spec. spec writing, of what the potential is if things were to fall into place. And so, but as long as you're thinking like that, I think, you'll have a better shot than it just being a screenplay. Have an ancillary market, which I do. I have sculptures, obviously if this goes well, we'll have a soundtrack to go with it. I want this to launch into a video game, definitely, and so there's just ways that this is a full quadrant thing, and so it really it's just a matter of getting someone to take I was, there's a production group in LA called, what is it called? Grande. They're a branch of MGM, El Grande. They specialize in Latino-centered films, but they're a branch of MGM. So I was pitching with them on Monday. And one of the things she said, Megan Espinoza, she was saying was, yeah, they're all kind of, we're on the topic of, IP. IP, I'm looking for IP. And so she was like, yeah, they're all just kind of waiting right now. And I kind of finished her sentence. And I was like, they're waiting to see who takes a risk, right? And she's like, yeah, pretty much. And I'm like, and when they take a risk and they do well, everyone's just kind of flock to it and do their own derivative version of it, right? And they're like, yeah, pretty much. That's kind of how I was like, see, I was like, all right, okay, I get it. All right, fine. I get, we she's looking for different stuff. 2D animation for adults isn't really their area at the moment. Nor is it a lot of people's, but that's kind of the name. That's kind of what it is. Like, here to help you, but can't really work with you right now. That's not our focus. But it was just refreshing to hear that because they're like, okay, it ain't just me seeing this. I'm not crazy that, they're kind of cutting their nose to spite their face industry wise. Yeah. And so we'll see how that pans out. But hopefully, I tell you, if it works out, you'll be seeing me again. Smitten like a kitten, talking about how this is going to be the best thing since the Matrix. So.
Well, you're a good storyteller, and that's exciting.
I guess that's what I've been told. I like to think I am. You spin up. Anybody who's written books, graphic novels, you have these moments where you live the character, you live the moments, and you shed some tears because you're actually feeling what you're writing. There's that moment, where. So logically, we're going to feel closer to it than other people. And so, yeah, naturally, we're going to be like, yeah, this is the best thing. This is the best thing. Is getting other people to see it, obviously, is the challenge. And making sure that you're clear in what you are creatively trying to bring to life for other people. Yeah. So, yeah.
Well, it's been 2 hours, 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Time flies when we're having fun.
Sure does.
So, last two questions.
Yeah.
Where book suggestions? What book suggestions do you have?
Good question. Let me think about that for a second. I'm left field with this one. I love question and answer books where it's basically an interview but put in book form. Mm-hmm. So there is a book by Jiddu Krishnamurti, and he is being interviewed by David Bohm. And gosh, I can't even remember I think it's The Origins of Conflict or something like that, The Essentials of Conflict. It's been such a long time that I've read it, but it still resonates because it talks a lot about, anybody who follows Jiddu Krishnamurti talks a lot about measurement, and how humans we're kind of obsessed with measurement. Mm-hmm. And that's part of what creates our suffering is because we're always cross-comparing and measuring the value of this and measuring the worth of that instead of just letting it be. And I saw value in that because, I think that it creates a lot of hardship amongst people. We're always placing value on things. And it gets in the way of actually truly accepting people as they are, right? And there is an obsession with that. And I think a lot of times it might be interpersonal. We want value because we want to be associated with it in some way because it in turn might bring value to us to be a part of it. And so we keep it alive because one day we might be a part of it, and not realizing that we're buying into a larger system of comparison and measurement that's not good overall. You know what I mean? But he talked, he had some interesting points that kind of made me think a lot about how we treat each other as people. You know what I mean? That book's kind of in left field. It's not even really a creative thing, But again, Joseph Campbell's Hero with a Thousand Faces, that's always a good go-to. Kind of talks to you a little bit about character development a little bit, and there's only so many ways you can depict a character. Or at least that's what he says. But it's a good read in terms of thinking about, if you're into storytelling, how you can talk about how you want your character to be perceived and how to build them. Yeah, so those are two, I guess. Yeah, don't quote me on the Jiddu Krishnamurti one, but yeah, there's one that he talks about that. I forgot the name.
Okay, well then,
Anyway.
last but not least, where can people find you?
Oh man, I'm pretty much stapled at the university, so that's the number one place you can find me at Eastern. I'm pretty well known on the campus. I've been there long enough, and so I work in the Career Center, and my title is the same for now, Associate Director for Employer Relations. That's the main place you can find me. In terms of my work, you can find me at watsonproductions.com. So that's WATS- productions.com, and that'll take you to my very basic website, but it still talks about my projects, and so that's how you can find more about my work. So yeah.
Well, good. I hope you guys enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. Check out all of Romeal's links in the video description below. Be sure to hook him up with some page ranking. Be sure to hit the like button, subscribe, and smash that bell for more data-driven insights. See you next time. Bye.
That a Mining Mike podcast that you like.